Okay, hello everyone. Still figuring out a little technology, so bear with me. Ash did a beautiful hello in the comments, and welcome. So thank you, Ash, and thanks to the Kansas City Artist Coalition for hosting this and allowing me to show you what I do and a little bit about me. So I'll first talk about a little bit about me, and then I'm going to do a few different demos. So the first thing I want to say is thank you, and I'm Alicia Kelly. I live in Lawrence, Kansas. I have a studio here in my house. This is part of it, as well as I have a studio down in the West Bottoms in the Wholesome Foods building. And I have been living in Lawrence for about 15 years on and off. I ended up going to KU and graduated with a bachelor's in printmaking. And it was kind of there that I started falling in love with paper and decided that I wanted to sculpt it and mess with it and manipulate it in any way that I possibly could. So after going to KU, I kind of fell into teaching in Lawrence. Primarily at the Lawrence Arts Center and at Van Gogh, which is another nonprofit arts center in town that specifically caters to high school and young adults. There I teach paper cutting and paper sculpture as well as screen printing in both. So I want to talk a little bit about my process. I'm just going to jump right in. What I do, and then I'm going to do a live paper cutting demo, and then I'm going to do a couple of pop-up book demos. So if you have, and you want to follow along, you have paper and scissors and a pencil, you can do all of these demos, and glue. If you have like Elmer's glue or any kind of glue, but we can go without. So primarily I do a lot of paper cutting, all by hand, all with an X-Acto blade. Number 11 is my favorite. I've tried others. That one works well for me. So I want to show some examples of some things I do. I'll be walking around, so don't mind me. The first type of work that I love doing, of course, is paper cutting. Meditative. All of my works are planned a little bit on paper, but mainly it's about the process and kind of being in that flow and being in the zone and letting each pattern that I work with kind of breathe on its own and manipulate itself. So here's one type, paper cutting. I do what I call paper sculpting, and it's where I'm not cutting the complete cutout out. When I cut, I'm actually leaving about a centimeter or two behind it, and then I am curling it. And both of this style of work is actually up at the at my show at the Artist Coalition right now. Sometimes I combine the two, so a little hard to see, but here is paper cutting here, and then the sculpting. So this is kind of a fun new space I've been playing with lately in how to create 3 dimensions, even just with a 1-dimensional piece. How can I create this background, foreground? I also work with paper in the 3D. And so I teach a couple classes there that are about screen printing 3D forms. So we create the forms, we screen print them flat, and then we fold them up. They're templates to begin with. And here is one that's just folded, but here is from a single sheet, and this is a stellated dodecahedron. I had to learn the term. So I work with this kind of work, not as often, but it's a nice mental mathematical challenge. I also, something I've kind of been exploring lately, and I recently just got a grant. I'm a part of a grant out of Alaska with a friend there. And we are doing a grant that is about wearable art and wearable textures that aren't just textile. And so I've been playing around with wearable head sculptures. And here is an example of one, a very, a model, still figuring it out, still pretty rough. But you wear it not just like this, you can wear it like this and sculpt it up. Caught on my hair. Sculpt it up. It is made out of Tyvek. So other than just regular cotton papers, which I mostly work with framed pieces, the other type of paper I work with is Tyvek. It's great. It's versatile. I'm obsessed. I buy it in big rolls. It's great for installations. It's great for anything that's going to be outside for an extended amount of time. It can get wet and it'll droop a little bit, but you can wash it. If it gets dirty, you can wash it off. If it crinkles in a way you don't want, you can iron it on a low setting. Tyvek is a dream. I buy it in huge rolls out of a place. Here's a roll. I buy it out of a place out of Philadelphia that caters specifically to artists and kind of different ways you want to work with Tyvek, and they have a couple different kinds. And I also do installations. Behind me is part of one, and that's something I love to do. It's all out of Tyvek as well. I like installations that you can walk in. The shadows are also a big part of it. Shadows and light play in a lot to my work. And so using cast shadows really expands it. It can be 5 feet, but with shadows, you can really fill up a room. And so my current installations have been really playing with how to enter that space, how to exit it, how do you interact with that space, how do you feel in that space. And so, yeah, that's exciting. So I'm just gonna jump right into me cutting a piece. I want you all to see kind of my process, how I cut, how loose it is, how quick I cut. I've been cutting paper for 13 years. Have only cut myself once, and I was not cutting. It was a stupid accident. And so I want you to see just kind of my process. So I'm gonna move the camera down, and then hopefully you can see it a little closer. So here we go. Bear with me. Okay, so here's my paper. Hopefully you can see everything good. I just picked a random piece of paper. I have created, you might not see it right now, but I've created a small X in the middle. I'm just going to pick a circle, which is a shape I play with a lot. So sometimes I'm going to use a compass for this, but sometimes I just pick up whatever I have that is circular, sometimes a bowl. Oh, this looks like a great size. So right now I'm going to use a compass. I love compasses. I love any kind of shape I can play with that I can manipulate into positive and negative space with others. So I'm going to draw just a circle. And typically at this point, let's say I'm actually going to start a piece that I want to work on. I have an idea of what process I want to use, or kind of a general idea of what the piece might look like, more on the design side than the actual finished piece, because I do allow, when I'm learning a new pattern, I work with so many different patterns with paper cutting, that once I've learned a pattern so well and I know how to change its direction, weave it, move it in and out, I kind of retire that pattern and go on to the next one. So I'm going to do this. I never do this with a Sharpie, but I want you all to see the lines and see everything I'm doing as well as possible. So let's say I have this circle. My idea, I'm going to work with a pattern. In pencil, I get a typical idea, looking at space, playing with design elements. Sometimes I consider myself more of a designer than I do an artist in some facts. So let's say, and then where do I want to put this little one? So let's say that's my general, here, let's make sure it's in there. Let's say that's my general piece. So this paper, by the way, is a cotton, just a cotton printmaking paper. I believe it is an Arches. I like sculpting specifically on 2D pieces with a cotton printmaking paper because it's a little thicker. Tyvek is a little thinner, the kind that I'm using, which it's a Tyvek hard structure 10G, if you want to know specifically. So I have these pieces right here, and these are my big spots that I'm going to cut into, but maybe I'm just going to go for it. Sometimes I go for it, which is most of the time. So cutting wise, hopefully you all can see this well. Sometimes you follow, so this one I'm going to cut out. I like to poke mine out in the middle when I want to let the piece go to just get it out of my life. It's a lot faster. So this pattern is one I've worked with a lot. I've learned it. My cutting right now isn't typically following my equation that I generally do, but sometimes it's fun for me to create the change even in the middle of cutting. I'm okay with, you know, letting it weave and move into the next. So I'm going to cut a minute so you can see and be in my meditation with me. A couple of the things that I do is I hold a lot. I'm right-handed. I hold with my left hand the paper down so it doesn't move or slide. I don't push too much. After years of doing this, it can create some shoulder problems. And yes, I get a lot of massages on my wrist when I can and on my back. Trying to stretch and change positions a lot is key, I've noticed, with paper cutting, especially with installation. Sometimes pieces are so big I have to work on the floor. So rotating my position a lot, that's a big thing. It's almost like a song and dance. A lot of times paper doesn't want to come out at the end, at the tip when you're cutting it, so I kind of sometimes pull on it and then come back and fix. I do cut through. A question I get a lot is, do I cut through my pieces? I do, not as much as I used to. I definitely have a hold of it, of the process a little bit more over the years. I do still cut through, though. I do still make mistakes, and there are magic tools such as Scotch tape, or Scotch tape if it's not a permanent fix. But if it's permanent, I will sometimes cut little bits of paper and then use an archival glue to glue the back there. Also, sometimes I cut through and I leave it because I'm a big fan of the human element in things and things not being robotic and perfect. I always say a wavy line is more beautiful than a straight one. The touch by a hand is really important, and by a human to me. So this gives you an idea of kind of the paper cutting. So I want to show you on the other side. This is what it looks like on this side. And then on the back, it's starting to be see-through. I also want to show you, it might be a little hard to see when I'm cutting, but I want to show you how I sculpt paper. It's a new process that I've kind of been experimenting with, and I'm excited to explore more with. So paper, the sculpting is where I'm going to cut, but leave a little bit of room at the tip and leave it attached. So I'm going to do a couple of those so you can see that as well. So I'm cutting right here. I'm going around, I'm going to leave it. Cutting, go around, leave it. I first fell in love really with cutting paper when KU, where I went to school, had a visiting artist come. I was in my early 20s, and she came. Her name was Crystal Wagner, and she's still doing amazing, great art and installations herself, paper and different materials. But she came through and was doing an installation, a screen printed paper installation with our printmaking class, and part of it was we were screen printing a whole bunch of her abstract prints, and then we had to meticulously cut out certain parts of it. And I had never thought about using an X-Acto blade as a pencil. And now at times I feel like I'm more comfortable with it. The tips do break. I go through a lot of X-Actos. The tips do break on them. I keep those for other things that I might cut, like mat board or just straight edges. But once it's broken, a lot of times the tip breaks, I put it to the side and I get a new one. So at any given day, I can go through 5 to 15 blades depending on what I'm cutting and what I'm cutting through. So I'm pushing pretty hard with my hand as well. So now I'm going to sculpt it. So I will hold this up a little bit more if you can see it right here that I've cut. So I'm going to turn it around. So when I'm doing a piece like this, there's a couple of pieces in scratching the surface that have both paper cutting and paper sculpture. So when I do it, I have to cut everything out, the paper cuts first, and then I go into the sculpting. And the sculpting, I have to cut the whole entire piece, and then I turn it around, and I have to pop out each one of these pieces. I watch a lot of documentaries. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of bad early 90s movies. I would say bad and amazing movies. So I'm popping these out, and because it's thicker paper, I'm not as worried of it ripping off. So now I take the flat side of my X-Acto, and I'm going to go in, and there is a certain way I have to do this because of my hand and how it lays. I don't want to just stick my hand on it, because once this starts to sculpt, I have to kind of move away from it. So I do move my paper a lot. I start with certain areas and kind of work around. So I'll start with this one, and it's kind of like, I feel like I'm slowly pushing on it, and paper has so many magic qualities and give that it allows it to stay up. If it was super humid, these little bits here, I can't work in humid environments because of the moisture on paper. It will droop, so that's something I always think about in my studios. This reminds me of kind of curling ribbon in a way. So I go through and I'm using my finger to kind of hold it, and then the back to curl. And I can do this for hours. Meditative, it definitely, I feel like I'm a big component of believing that art is really good for the brain and mental health. And I feel like this meditative practice really is a meditation and keeps me healthy and happy, keeps me, sometimes I'm not thinking about anything at all. And sometimes I'm thinking about the day or thinking about the process, why I'm doing it. Sometimes I try not to overanalyze why I'm doing it and just enjoy it. So you can see that these are starting to create a little bit of a dimension. And what's really fun about playing with paper sculpting is that the dimension is really nice, especially with light behind it. You can see parts of it, and then you can kind of see shadows within it, so it makes it seem a lot more dimensional than it even is. I also like to make sound effects, so if you hear a sound effect, no judgment, please. So this kind of gives you an idea of the difference. So with these, I would go back and kind of sculpt up some more, kind of refine it. I always go back before I frame a piece and kind of go through and sculpt some. I have a big piece in Scratching the Surface that is called Dancing Alone Together, which was one of the first pieces made during the pandemic. It's right when you walk in the gallery. And most of that is all paper sculpting, but if you're there, I have, I believe, 2 pieces that I accidentally cut out and I decided to leave. So it's like a scavenger hunt to find where the hidden pieces are. So that is kind of my primary work that I do, but I wanted to also kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about pop-up books. I'm going to move this up. Hello. So I also teach pop-up book techniques. It's something I've been teaching for about 4 years now. I learned from an amazing woman named Colette Fu. She taught me out at Penland Arts and Crafts, which is an amazing arts and crafts school that has residencies as well as 1 week and 2 week long workshops. Great ones, totally recommend it. So I went there a few years ago, 2016, and I took a 2 week long workshop with her. I was really interested in how to manipulate paper in that 3D, almost paper engineering form. And she went through a whole bunch of the techniques that I do teach now, and I teach a little bit more as well. Also, if you look her up, she recently she was trying to break the Guinness Book of World Records for biggest pop-up. So she's worth checking out. She made a pop-up. It is the biggest pop-up, but it's not a book, so it didn't, I don't know if it broke it officially, but in my heart it did. So I want to show you, when I went there, I was playing around with pop-ups, and I was playing with stencil doilies, just some sort of imagery that I could pop up, since a lot of times I work with abstraction and patterns. And so I want to show you my very first pop-up. I went big. I'm someone who, when I'm learning something and I need to change it and move it, I need to go big. So this is, let's turn it the right way. This is the first pop-up where I'm learning kind of the technique. Maybe from here it looks clean, or maybe not. It's pretty dirty. There's a lot of marks on it of me moving things, changing things. Things now, this is from 4 years ago, are sagging. They're not held properly, but I was really proud of this first big one. And I think a part of going big too was an inspiration from Colette, because she works with her own imagery that she takes. And then she works really big with it, cuts it out and does huge shows with it. So I wanted to, I teach a virtual pop-up class right now, and I teach one in person pre-pandemic. And I wanted to show a couple of the pop-ups because they're super fun, and a lot of the pop-ups can be done all ages. I only allow you to be 11. 11 is the youngest in my class if you're using an X-Acto, and I have a whole X-Acto spiel about holding it, about making sure that the blade's turned upside down when you're not using it, but I won't do that here. So I want to talk a little bit about pop-up books, and then I'm going to do 3 quick pop-ups. So if you have any cardstock or even copy paper will work for this, but it won't stay, it won't have that lift that you want in a regular pop-up. So with pop-ups, what's so beautiful about pop-up books and paper in general is it's so accessible. I love that you can grab any scrap paper and kind of make something out of it. The paper I use for pop-ups, and at least teaching demos, is a thicker paper. So this is what I'm going to use. It's just a cardstock. You can get it anywhere at 65 pound. Just for reference, copy paper is about 20 pounds. So you need a thicker paper so it can hold that pop-up. So for pop-ups, pretty much all you need is paper. You need your X-Acto blade with your number 11 blade. Sometimes you use a bone folder, which is a tool used for folding properly, or I can score. If I want to fold in a certain area, I can use this to mark that area and then fold it. Great for creases. I also have a pencil, ruler, and then my favorite kind of glue that I use for class is a PVA. It's a bookbinding glue, PVA. And it's fast drying, it's archival, it also is just an all-around great glue. You can use Elmer's as well. That's not going to be archival, but it still works. No judgment here. I also want to talk about, real quick before I jump in, another tool. Let me grab it here. That I was showing to my pop-up books class the other day, and I love sharing this tool because it was a gift from a printmaking friend of mine who sent it to me in the mail, and I had no idea what it was at the time. Absolutely no idea. And it is a Japanese screw punch. This is what it looks like, and it has like a bit right here, and it comes with other little bits that you can add to it that have different size diameter of circles. You can probably buy them with other shapes. I just have circles. And the beautiful thing about this tool, I'm going to angle this down real quick. The beautiful thing about this tool is it's like a hole punch for any place that you want. And you can change the size. I think this is a magical tool, and as a paper cutter who does patterns and circles a lot, this saves a lot of time and effort and hurt wrists. So the Japanese screw punch, a beautiful tool, also used in bookbinding sometimes to help thread the spine of the book, putting it together. So I'm going to start with some pop-ups. 3 very quick pieces. So we're going to start from the easiest, which is called a single slit, and then I'm going to go to something called a generation, and then I'm going to show a spiral, because I want to show how simple a spiral is and how simple pop-ups are and how they look. They look difficult, but it's a lot easier than you think. So first I am going to, let me move this over so you can see everything. So here is my sheet. This is called a backing sheet typically. There's a few rules with pop-up books, 2 main rules. Everything, here, open this up. So this is my backing sheet. This area right here, the spine in pop-ups, we call the gutter. There's other names for it. I've always called it the gutter. So one of the rules is every pop-up must span the gutter, so it has to be somehow on either side of the gutter to pop up. Another rule is that the pop-up must be balanced on either side to properly pop up. That doesn't mean you can't have asymmetrical sideways pop-ups, but you have to balance that out, and there are some math equations with that. The third rule is, so you span the gutter, either the pop-up has to span the gutter or a pop-up has to be attached to another pop-up to actual pop. There's a lot of pops in that. So yeah, those are general rules, but from there I am going to do a single slit. And this is, anyone who can hold scissors and fold can do this. So right now I am going to gutter side. I'm never cutting from the open side, but from the gutter side. I'm going to mark this and show you what I'm doing. From the gutter side, I'm just going to draw an inch and a half line. Next, I'm going to cut through both, and then I am going to fold at a triangle, just whatever I'm feeling like. This is where that bone folder would come in. So this is where, when you get really intense folding, or you're folding a lot of paper, this is where you would use that. So we're going to start with one. Unfold it. Now you have this little triangle. I like to crease my crease the opposite way and then let it fold. And that is going to give you a little pop-up. So let's try to make it a mouth. We'll pop it back into the first position where it was. Take it back here. I'm going to fold it on the other side. Where's my bone folder? I name most of my tools. I haven't named the bone folder. Maybe any suggestions are welcome. So pop up here. I'm going to now pop up this other side. Sometimes I call it finagling and just finding where the pop-up goes. I can bone fold this. And look at that. I got a mouth. You can now glue eyes on here. You have now created another gutter right here that you can cut into and keep adding to. If you were making this a card, because you wonder, you know, that's not going to work as a card, is it? So you can glue it in here, and then you can kind of add some dimension, some different color. You can see how it's talking. Another quick add-on to this is a single slit. Another quick add-on is called an inverse slit. So I have these. I got it back into my very first position. And then what I'm going to do is I'll just show this by drawing the lines. One cut, 4 folds, and that's all that this is. So I've drawn these 2 lines that are parallel to my folds. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold on those now. If you were worried about folding this properly, this is where the bone folder comes in as a good tool. If you were like, oh, I'm a, you know, some people are more of a perfectionist. So you can go in and score it. Score it, that allows the folding a little bit easier. So with this inverse, you can actually create a little bit more dimension with it, and you can continue doing more and more inverses. It's not just this one. So I had a student once who was 13 who did, I think, 7 or 8 inverses on a huge sheet of paper, and it was beautiful. Looked like a really difficult pop-up, but it's just a back and forth of folding. So I have both of these. I'm going to do my first pop-up that I did the first time, just the single slit, just to make sure that she's folding how I want. Now, if you can see this, there is a little bit of a fold here, and with that, that's where I folded it. I'm going to push it back. Push it back, and I kind of squeeze it to make sure it wants to go. I'm going to shut it. I like to shut the pop-up between each fold so it ensures. Then I'll do this back one. And then I'll shut it one more time. And then you have an inverse, a funny mouth. So that is one way. You can also cut into them. So of course I'm going to put some paper cutting into it. You have to fold everything first, and then if I wanted to cut in this, I would just lay it flat and cut into it. You have to have those folds that kind of lead the way. So here's just a single slit cut. Simple. You can also, instead of just cutting straight down, you can make it wavy, you can change it around. It doesn't just have to be one straight line. So here is one, hopefully everyone can see it, that kind of looks like a leaf. And how I cut that one is I first shut it and I cut this kind of leafy texture here. I popped it up, did all of that, and then I laid it flat and cut this out. And now, fooled you, made it look hard, but it's not. Okay, so I'm going to go on to 2 more quick pop-ups. That is single slit. A single slit and a single slit inverse. So the next one I'm going to do is something that always wows people the first day of pop-up class. Is called generations. And it's because you're doing, it's like a family generation. You're doing one to the next to the next. So I'm going to start with my backing sheet folded from the gutter, and I'm going to draw this out with Sharpie so you can all see it. So from the gutter, I'm going to draw 1, 2, I'm going to draw 4. 4 concentric circles. I want these circles, obviously they're very similar. So I want these circles to be about a ½ inch away if I can. From there, from parallel to the gutter, this being the gutter, I'm going to create these black lines. And these are kind of place markers, so I know that I don't cut them off. If I just cut this whole thing out, I'm just going to have a circle, but we want it to pop. And it needs to, of course, as a pop-up rule, attach to the gutter to pop. This being the gutter. So this, granted, it will be cut out, but these are going to be acting gutters, which is kind of confusing, but bear with me. It's an easy cut. So you can use scissors or your X-Acto, and I'm cutting through both sides up to, so when I cut, I'm going to cut this side up to this line, this side, and I'm going to just follow that through. So let me do this real quick. Cutting through two pieces of cardstock can become tiresome after a while, so take care of yourself, take care of the body. So I've cut up onto each. Now I'm going to fold. You could take your bone folder and score this, but now I'm going to fold each piece up into that line, just so I'm securing my my pop-up one at a time. So you see it still is attached. You don't have to do, it's not going anywhere. You don't have to do a circle. You could do a heart. You could do any shape that you want. So we open it up and we're attached on these sides, but we want to pop these up every other one. So what I'm going to do, starting with the outer ring, I am going to take these creases that were once my gutter, but I'm going to crease them the other way using my thumb and index finger, just the other way to kind of make sure that it's popping the way I want. And then, like I said, I do one pop-up at a time. I'm going to slowly, where I want it to be, push down. So that's the first one. Also, a rule of thumb as creating pop-ups is you never want your pop-up to fall outside of the paper. It happens to the best of us, but when you're learning, it's part of it. So I'm going to skip the second ring, and I'm going to go to the third ring. The second ring and the fourth ring can stay back. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing, crease it the opposite way, grab my outer ring, and then slowly shut it. And that gives you a simple generations. If this is something you want to do at home, you can create it with, just remember, you have to do an even number of circles. I did it with 4. If you do an odd number, it doesn't pop correctly. So do it with an even number. You could do 8, 10, whatever that you want. And with a backing sheet, it blows minds. Pop-up books are great because you can pretty much, you'll never have to buy cards again. You can make every card that you want. So that is generations. This is a circle generation. The last thing I'm going to show is how to do a spiral. I want to show you a spiral that I created. So this is the piece, and then this is the spiral. This one's a little long, but it reminds me of a roller coaster. So close, open. I made the spiral first before I glued it. I cut it out, and voila. So I'm going to go through this. This is also like a 2-minute pop-up, so prepare yourself. What we'll do is we'll have a backing sheet. I want this to be my backing sheet. Fold it in half. Put that to the side. Now I'm going to take, this is going to be my spiral. And how I do this is we're going to start with literally just creating a spiral. If you make it really big and long and you keep going, that's where you run into where I made mine too long. You know, you're always learning. So with this spiral, you then have to cap out the end. So this end needs to attach right here, and then this end just needs a little hook. That's it. And now we cut it out.
pop-up books are really interesting. I think a lot of people with pop-up book techniques and paper engineering, there is math involved, but there are a lot of techniques that you can really forego any math that you need to know. I know when you say math and engineering, some people that aren't minded that way can kind of get frightened, but there are ways to go around it, and I find it really important to kind of, I teach the equations or offer up the equations and the math, but I also have simple ways, like we need a 90-degree angle and we don't have the tools for that. You can cut off the end of, you know, a piece of paper and you have this 90-degree angle here that you can then trace. I have little hacks like that Colette taught me and some that I've found myself. So I literally just cut out this spiral. Spiral is here. I want to cut out the middle a little bit more. I'll kind of make sure it's spiraling well. So here, if I wanted to create that cutout pattern, this is when I would go in and do my designs. You also never want to cut too close to the edge. You want to create, I try to leave at least 2 centimeters, maybe. I want to leave enough that I'm not going to cut through. So next, spiral is done, backing sheet is done. Now I need my PVA glue, my favorite. I'll put that here. And what we're first going to start with is gluing, putting a little dab of glue on here. Something to consider is the pop-up needs to not, the spiral does not need to cross the gutter. Because it's going to span the gutter, it does not need to, if you try to put it in the middle, it's not going to work. It has to be on one side or the other. I also, knowing this, but teaching it, I don't want this part to go way over here or way over here because my spiral isn't big enough. It's a little confusing, but maybe you'll see it. Sometimes I could make the mistake of just doing it, which is great, a great learning opportunity. So I'm going to put a dab of glue on the back of this and literally just let it glue a minute. Sometimes I shut it, give it some good energy. I have a lot of superstitions in printmakers. A lot of printmakers can be superstitious in their printmaking, and I think that's followed me to paper cutting and pop-ups, so I'm always doing something that I always do. So the next thing, we have this, it's attached, it's pretty good on being glued. The next thing you do is you just literally put a tiny bit of glue on the end of the spiral. So from there, I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue, enough that it's going to glue, but not too much, and we'll let that. Let it glue. And this is, there's a lot of pop-up techniques that pretty much you just need to shut it and it finds where it needs to fold. Once you have one part of it correct, the other part will find where it needs to be. At least what I have found in the techniques I teach. So now, nope, not glued yet. See my impatience? We'll do this. You name it in a pop-up, I've probably messed it up in some way, right? Okay. So now you have the spiral. This is a short one, simple, a fan favorite. So that is the last pop-up demo I want to do. I'm going to move this up. I'm getting to the end, and I just really wanted to say thank you for tuning in, all of you that's been watching. I appreciate it. It's my first time doing a Facebook Live. I hope it's been enjoyable. And if you have any questions or anything you want to talk to me about, any of the processes, please let me know. Or please visit the show. The show, Scratching the Surface, is up until the 25th, I believe, at KCAC. So thank you so much for watching. Visit my website. It's aliciakellyart.com. I have a sale going on. That's all I'll say. I won't plug in anything else. But thank you all so much, and I will see you next time.